Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Young, and I am a spiritual advisor and a professional astrologer and tarot reader. And what I wanted to do was a presentation on the upcoming retrogrades of Mercury and Mars, just to give you a chance to think about how those energies might be utilized for you during the period of time that these 2 points will be retrograde. Mercury retrograde happens 3 times a year for 3 weeks at a time. Mars actually retrogrades once every 2 years. So this is part of the cycle for Mars retrograde that we're going to be experiencing. So I'm going to do a little bit of a slideshow presentation, and then I'm going to take a look at the US chart and what this means, but more generally speak about how it could impact you. And then, of course, if you know your chart, you can understand where this may be specifically impacting you in your own design. And I can show you that by actually utilizing my chart as an example. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the presentation. So what we're going to be taking a look at, as I said before I switched over to the presentation here, is we're going to look at Mercury retrograde and Mars retrograde. So what's going to happen is Mercury is going to go retrograde on the 17th, or sorry, the 26th at 17 degrees. So it's going to be tomorrow. This is being recorded on the 25th. And this is Eastern Standard Time that I'm looking at. So if you're in a different time zone, it could potentially be on a different day, especially if you're several hours in a different time zone. But for the most part, we're going to be looking at November 26th at the start of the retrograde, and it will be retrograde until December the 16th. So it's a 3 week period. And because the retrograde happens deep enough in Sagittarius, Mercury will actually spend 9 weeks in Sagittarius from November the 2nd all the way until January the 8th. Now, what does it mean for it to be retrograde in Sagittarius? And this will be the last retrograde of the year. It's going to bring inner reflection, which is going to spark a reevaluation of beliefs, hopefully inspiring thoughtful exploration and a deeper search for the truth. So, one of the things that we probably will be facing with this particular retrograde, especially after this election, if you're living in the United States, but really anywhere in the world that you might be living, whether the US election impacts you or not, there's definitely going to be this sort of what do we believe in and why, and how are our beliefs changing with the changing structure of the world, which is happening fairly rapidly. And certainly, if you look at any of my previous videos, one of the things that I repeat, and I'll repeat even in this video, is that we have a number of transits that are quite significant historically speaking, that are all happening at the same time. The one that most recently just completed was Pluto moving through Capricorn, which it did during the time of the American Revolution. It's just now entered permanently into Aquarius as of November the 19th. The other two are Neptune being in Pisces. It's still in Pisces. It won't exit permanently until the beginning of 2026. The last time it was in Pisces was 1847 to 1862, so that was the lead up to and the first 2 years of the Civil War. And then the other major transit, which is Uranus in Taurus, that is going to be in place until the middle of, well, July of 2026. And that particular transit, historically, the last time it was in the sign of Taurus was 1934 to 1942. So we're talking about the Great Depression and the lead up to World War II. So these are periods of very radical, tremendous change that we're living through a similar kind of energy right now. And I think we're able to see what's going on out in the world. And this really does have an impact on our beliefs. And so, specifically, Mercury's movement through Sagittarius, or if you happen to have Mercury in Sagittarius, if you know your chart, you happen to know you have Mercury in Sagittarius, it's a very philosophical placement. It's definitely concerned about beliefs, the wider world, how we're connected to the wider world, how our beliefs play in the wider world, how the systems of belief affect us on a personal level. And so the retrograde period is absolutely going to require us to think more internally about what we believe in and how our beliefs actually affect our actions. And this period of time of the retrograde is to reflect on that, to really dig deep into that. So it can be an excellent time to, if you don't already have a meditation practice, to start a meditation practice. It can also be an excellent time to kind of take a step back from interaction with the world. Maybe take a day where you go out and get away from the world, turn off your cell phone, and just really kind of sit with what you believe is how the world is unfolding and your role in it. So this will be a fairly significant time. And of course, part of this retrograde will happen over the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. And that could represent obviously some opportunities to reflect on family, how you're connected with family, what you want out of this time that you're going to have during Thanksgiving. Now, the next thing will happen is Mars is going to go retrograde on December the 7th in Leo at 6 degrees. Since it's going to happen early enough in the degrees, it's actually going to ingress back into Cancer, and that will happen on January the 6th. Then on February 24th, it will go direct in Cancer at 17 degrees. And then on April the 18th, it will ingress back into Leo. So Mars is going to have two different flavors to it in terms of which sign it's in when it's retrograde. So the first flavor is that it will turn energy inward and it will fuel self-reflection and re-examining of personal desires, creativity, and the pursuit of authentic expression. So Leo's energy actually is performance. It's about being a leader. This will be interesting too, because this particular period of time that's going to be affected is going to lead up to and be part of the inauguration of the new president re-elect of Donald Trump. When it gets to Cancer, the energy will continue its inward work, but it will be prompting a reevaluation of the actions and deeper connections to your emotional resilience or what it is that matters to you on an emotional level. And so this will be really about how we feel about things and what those feelings represent in terms of this retrograde energy. So what I'm going to do now is actually move over and talk about how these energies are going to play in regard to the US chart. So we're going to take a look at that as our next consideration. So what I want to do is just take a moment to switch over to looking at that chart. So now I've switched over to the actual chart of the United States, and this is using the one that is most commonly selected, which is called the Sibley chart or Sibley chart. And this is set for July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Now, what I've done is I've just restricted this to taking a look at the placement of Mercury and Mars in terms of this particular period of transition. So here is Mercury at 22 degrees of Sagittarius on November the 26th, 2024. Mars happens to be at 5 degrees at that particular time. What we'll notice that will be important is that Mercury is going to work its way back over the United States ascendant. Mars is going to get very close to the north node for the United States. It will not actually reach the north node before it retrogrades, but it will be close to it on the time of its starting retrograde. So what we're going to have is the work of Mercury and that energy of questioning belief and reevaluating belief, applying itself to the first house or the identity of the United States. And then Mars, by being on top of the North Node represents the stretch goal of the karma of the United States. And interestingly enough, it is to be a leader out in the world. The ninth house is Sagittarian, and it is ruled naturally by Sagittarius. In the US chart, it's ruled by Leo. But this is going to be a real press for what is the next phase, the next drive for the United States. And that's going to be getting close to happening. And then Mars is going to go retrograde and it's going to work its way back into the eighth house, which deals with emotional transformation, actually. And this is where the US Mercury resides. So in terms of the timing of things, it's going to kind of show you how this is going to work by looking at the movement of things. One of the neat things about this particular program I use is that I can advance things and show. So watch these movements here as we get specifically to the point where the retrograde of the Mercury ends up on top of the ascendant, which is going to happen right around December 6th and 7th, which is when the Mars retrograde is going to happen. And that retrograde is going to be, again, get close to the North Node, but not actually hit it. That will happen when it goes back direct. So in terms of this particular lead up to the December 6th date, there's definitely going to be, again, a lot of questioning of what is the identity of the United States and how is it going to be shaped, primarily through the new presidency and the changes in Congress. And then what are going to be the desires in terms of what the United States is going to look like to the wider world, and how is that going to be shaped by the personality and drive of not only the president, but the party and and so forth. So this is going to be a really impactful period of time of reflection for the country, largely, I think, helped by the fact that the election proved to be quite peaceful in many ways, in the sense that Trump did win both the Electoral College and did win the popular vote. So what we're looking at then is that the retrograde will complete its process and it will get all the way back to, I think it's going to get maybe all the way back to 6 degrees, and then it's going to turn back and go back direct. And then one of the things to understand about how Mercury retrograde works, and a chance to sort of explain what it represents, because there's a lot of sort of traditional, I want to say, misrepresentation, like you shouldn't sign contracts or you shouldn't travel during Mercury retrograde, or there's difficulty with communication. The not traveling and the not signing contracts is just kind of ridiculous. The contracts are getting signed and travel's happening all the time. The idea of it, the way I like to explain it to clients, and I'll explain it in this video, is it's just a change in the speed limit. So if you're not familiar with retrograde motion in terms of what it actually represents, it's two bodies moving in the same direction, and one of the bodies is going faster than the other, and it's currently behind and passing the slower body. So let's say we're going down the highway, you're doing 55 and I'm doing 65. What happens is when I pull up beside you and I look out my window at you as I'm passing you, you appear to be moving backwards. That's the retrograde motion, is my viewpoint looking at you as if you're going backwards because I'm passing you. You're not actually going backwards. You're just going slower than I am, which is why I like to use the speed limit metaphor to explain how to deal with Mercury retrograde, because the part that is accurate is communication can slow, disruptions do show up as a lesson. That's what Mercury retrograde is supposed to do. It's supposed to be an adjustment to slow down. And so if you're driving down the highway at 65 and you pull off at an exit and you start to head into a downtown, and as you go into the downtown region, the speed limit shifts to, say, 35. As long as you slow down to 35 and you go through the speed zone at 35 miles per hour, you're going to be fine. It's when you're trying to drive through a 35 zone at 65 miles per hour, that's why you see these kinds of disruptions that show up with Mercury retrograde, which is why it's so good to know when a Mercury retrograde is happening, because it can allow you to adjust your speed appropriately and then sign all the contracts you want, travel wherever you need to travel. But usually what I tell people with regard to travel is build in extra time, anticipate potential snafus. Then it won't be as disruptive. In terms of contracts or other actions, just take more time, do a review, ask someone else's eyes to be on whatever you're writing. Don't send the email immediately. Take a pause. The retrograde energy will benefit you by taking a pause before you send something out. That's how to take advantage of the power of the Mercury retrograde. So knowing that period of time, from November 26th to December the 6th here, is that you December the 15th, sorry, December the 15th, that you know that during that period of time, just be more careful, thoughtful with your communication, with your actions, with anything that you're deciding. Again, and especially with Sagittarius energy is an expansive energy. So when it goes retrograde, it's certainly not saying pull back and retreat. It's just saying be cautious and prudent, but continue to go forward and continue to try to expand. And because of the role it has in the belief system with Jupiter's rulership, then it is a requirement to really think about what are our beliefs doing? How are they working for us? And not only that, but what does this mean in terms of the transitioning of the United States identity, especially after such a difficult and contentious election year? So that's going to be part and parcel of it. So the Mars one's going to have a much longer effect, of course. It's going to last for months, and it is going to switch signs. And that's worth noting. Again, giving you the dates is to know when that's going to happen. So we're looking at January 24th, 2025. Actually, sorry, that's a little bit, I overshot that just a little bit. Let me get back to the exact date of the transition so that we're not so far over the top there. So what we're looking at in terms of going back or ingressing back into Cancer, that's going to be January 6th. Interesting that it's January 6th, right? In terms of what we recall about January 6th, back when there was the riot in the Capitol. And so we're going to see these patterns of questions about, what is it that, again, at an internal level is driving the country? What does it want to present itself as while the Leo energy is? But once it gets back to Cancerian energy, it really is going to ask this question of what do we sort of feel about and then putting those feelings out, and then looking at the actual, again, movement. We're going to see that on the the 20th, around the 20th, which interestingly enough is the inauguration date, Mars is going to be right on top of Mercury. And not only that, but we will see an opposition with Mercury itself coming close to opposing itself on that same day. So we're going to have astrological events that are quite significant in terms of what's transitioning with these retrogrades and how they're playing out on the scale of the United States chart. So I really wanted to be able to give you a chance to understand what these retrogrades are, and understand how the retrograde energy actually works and what the timing looks like. So, we absolutely have dates that are trigger dates, right? January 6th, January 20th, these are all trigger dates. Now, what will happen, of course, is that eventually we will see Mars go back direct, and then it will work its way back towards Leo. And what we'll do is eventually get it out of Cancer and going forward for the next 2 years, and that will happen right around April the 20th, 21st. It will go to Leo again. Now, one of the last things that I want to talk about, I'm actually going to turn off the screen share here and just talk to you directly. So, the full duration of a retrograde involves something called a shadow period. And there is a shadow period 3 weeks leading up to the retrograde. And then the shadow period ends roughly 3 weeks after the direct moment, when the point gets back to the degree it was in at the moment it went retrograde. So once Mercury returns to 17 degrees of Sagittarius and Mars returns to 6 degrees of Leo, that will be the time in which the full energy of the retrograde will be complete. And so let's just take a quick look at when that will be, just so you have that information available. So if we go back here and we return to the chart, and we can go back and pull back to when we're going to get, now again, the idea being that Mercury was retrograde at 17 degrees. So what we want to do is we want to get back to, when does it get back to 17 degrees? And that's going to occur on December the 29th. So the full retrograde cycle for Mercury will complete itself by December 29th, right at the end of the year. So this is really some powerful energy that's happening, and having us really think about what is going to be the future of this country and our individual role in it, and our own beliefs in terms of how we're dealing with all the other belief energy that's out there in the world, which is what the government represents itself as, what our peers represent itself as, what our community represents itself as. All of this is going to be going through a reevaluation. And then going further out in terms of looking at when Mars is going to get back to that 6 degrees, that's going to happen actually in May, right at the very beginning of May. So May 1st, we will have Mars completing its entire journey with regard to the retrograde. So the last thought I want to leave everyone with when thinking about, what does this represent, is the idea that we are dealing with a period of slowing down, reevaluating, even resting. And what does that look like in terms of our beliefs with Sagittarian energy of Mercury, and what we're projecting in terms of how we are leading and how we are being creative, as well as our emotional states. So, as always, I hope the video proves to be useful to you and you find it interesting. Now, again, at the very end, I always like to remind people that the best way to get a personal understanding of this is to take a look at it in terms of your actual individual chart. So, what I'm going to do is actually show you what it looks like in terms of these energies and how they apply to my particular chart as an example. So let me switch over to taking a look at my chart for you. So here we have my natal chart, and this is for tomorrow, November 26th. And what you can see here is that Mercury is actually moving through my second house, which deals with my personal finances, how I get my needs met. This particular house is currently, well, it was empty when I was born, so it's permanently empty. But this means that this transit is affecting how I look at and expand what I need to do in order to be able to take care of myself, to take care of anyone that is under my care, my family, and the thought process of how to do that. Now, some of this has been actually, while Mercury's been in Sagittarius, literally doing these videos has been a new energy that I've been trying to extend. And I'll be doing also another video coming up here soon for the cosmic weather for December. And so, looking at ways in which to share my knowledge and to utilize the sharing of that knowledge to help me get my needs met. Now, Mars is actually up at the top of the chart, which is in the 10th house for me. The 10th house deals with prosperity. It's often associated with career. It will retrograde back into the ninth house. So, the other thing that Mars is doing in terms of the retrograde is going to be looking at how I do my work, how I do get recognized, how I do connect with people, what matters to me in terms of being seen and presenting my ideas and utilizing that and performing actually. That's going to be a big part of this particular retrograde is how do I want to incorporate that and what ideas do I need to explore? And then once Mars goes back into the ninth house, which deals with a mastery of knowledge, but also belief system, and it will be in Cancer. So I think a lot of this is going to, again, reflect the work that I do with people and how do I connect with people in terms of helping them understand what's going on. And a lot of that connection is fairly emotional. It's cancering. It's a nurturing and caretaking energy. And so that drive of that energy will be activated during that retrograde period and will allow me to again think about how is it that I do what I do with compassion, how is it what I do with emotional intelligence. All of that energy will be something for me to review and think about and look at the different ways in which I provide techniques for working with people and get information out to people. And then again, once the Mars goes back into Leo, it'll be a push again to continue to see while Mars is in Leo, what can be done to connect with as many people in the world as possible. And a lot of this is really trying to find a way to get people to attend to you, right? It's Mars and Leo is very much an attention seeking kind of energy, and you want to do that in as healthy and positive a way as possible. So the energy for me is what do I need to do in terms of getting people to see what I do professionally, which hopefully you watching this video, you'll share this with other people. And I've always really pursued developing what I do from a word of mouth perspective. That's what I prefer. And that would be, again, reflective of how to continue to generate that in terms of the energy. So, if you want to understand what these retrogrades can mean for you on a very specific level, it would be about opening up your chart and looking and going, okay, well, where is Mercury moving in my chart? What have I got in Sagittarius? Which house is ruled by Sagittarius? Same for Mars. What have I got in Leo? Where is it in my chart in terms of the house placement? What does this energy mean? How might these energies be interacting with the rest of the chart in some way? The nice thing about the Mercury in Sagittarius is that it forms what's called a trine relationship with all of these points that I have in Aries. So it's a very reinforcing type of energy. Same with Mars. It actually creates a grand trine effect, if you will, because Mars is trining with these points, especially my Venus and my Chiron here. So again, a lot of opportunity to see what you can do with this energy and take advantage of it. So for me, a lot of it is going to be hopefully continuing to develop these videos, share this information, making contact with people and expanding my reach and hopefully helping as many people as possible. So that is really what this is about in terms of understanding the two retrogrades that are coming up and the effect that they're going to have. And so I hope everyone is doing well out in the world and ready for a wonderful Thanksgiving and the holiday season and take care.